Part 4. The Latrine Silver Lining. I've been talking about weird old boomers for a little while now, so I want to make it up to all of you at home and talk about some aspects of this movie that I actually really like before we get into the real nitty-gritty problems with Rise of the Beasts. There's a lot to like here, along with a few things that I think are really underappreciated. This isn't like Revenge of the Fallen, where I think the whole thing is garbage and there's like one or two moments that I think really stand out as being good. There's genuinely a lot of good stuff in Rise of the Beasts. Starting off with our introductions to Noah and Elena, which I thought were both really well done. They're natural, well-paced, have some funny moments, and we root for our two leads almost right off the bat. Noah's struggling to get a job to pay for his little brother's hospital bills. We get to know some stuff about him and his family, and we see a little bit of his daily routine. Meanwhile, for some reason, the Ellis Island National Museum of Immigration has begun collecting artifacts and dinosaur bones, and Elena is like super smart and knows all kinds of stuff about the artifacts they're bringing in, but her bitchy boss takes all the credit for all of her hard work. I guess Elena needs other friends. We can feel Noah's desperation upon being turned away from every opportunity, and Elena's frustration at being reduced to a secretary. It's very basic, but that's okay. I'm not expecting 12 angry men here. I really like the scene where the two of them meet for the first time. Noah's trying to explain the whole robot thing, and Anthony Ramos really sells how stupid he's finding the whole situation. Meanwhile, Elena is completely out of her element trying to evade Noah. It's a very natural way of telling us more about these characters without staring directly into the camera and explaining everything. And it reminds me of the time I was trying to explain to the cops why there was 14 vacuum-sealed bags of cat fur hidden in the fireplace in my house. Our enjoyment of our two leads is carried almost entirely by how charismatic Anthony Ramos and Dominique Fishback are. That's not a bad thing. I really feel like they both elevated these performances to their fullest potential. People complained these scenes were boring and lame and slow, but to those I say, go get your damn head checked. It's rare for a Transformers movie to have scenes that make me start liking a human character. Speaking of these scenes, overall the first hour of this movie is really solid and fun, minus a few little things that aren't really worth mentioning or complaining about, such as the blatant scaling issues during this scene in the alley. Is that a G1 reference? The scene when Noah breaks into the garage is a lot of fun. There's this exciting car chase through New York, a cool fight outside the museum, and we get introduced to Mirage, who's pretty sweet. When I heard Mirage was going to be voiced by famous actor Peter Davison, I was a little nervous because I know people don't like his comedy or whatever, but I thought he was pretty good in this movie. I'll get into the rest of the Autobot cast later, but Mirage is by and far the most fleshed out and memorable of the lot, and we end up rooting for him and caring about the friendship he has with Noah and his little brother. It's one of the strongest elements of the whole movie, even when the movie gets bad. Peter Davison is able to pull off the dramatic scenes, the intense scenes, and the comedy scenes really well. Mirage is fun, despite making gross sex jokes in front of a kid.
We're just work friends.
Work friends? You've been inside me.
Let's never do that again, okay?
Every single scene matters. There's no scene that does not matter. Every word matters, every line matters.
You've been inside me.
There's a huge contrast between how we're introduced to Mirage and how we're introduced to the rest of the Autobot cast. When the rest of the Autobots show up in this movie, they just kind of appear with very little fanfare, while Mirage gets a whole scene to introduce himself. Like when the Autobots have revealed themselves to the humans for the first time in every other movie, it's been like an event, you know? But here they just kind of walk into frame. We have this scene in the warehouse where we're introduced to the cast properly, but I wouldn't even say we're introduced to them really. They just kind of show up. Whenever this sort of stuff happens in the other movies, usually we get a scene where we get to know the Autobots. Maybe Optimus Prime introduces them one at a time, you know? But we'll discuss that further later on. Other than that, this whole opening hour is pretty great. I always liked when Transformers leaned more into the robots in disguise element and had them trying to sneak around and get into silly antics to stay hidden. It's something that either gets kind of lost in the various adaptations or just gets super lame and repetitive when you have to dance around the fact that some crazy shit is going down and somehow nobody is seeing it. I just hope Rise of the Beast doesn't do anything like that. I liked Wheeljack even though he didn't really do anything and he had no character. It's crazy how this guy who has 11 lines total and looks like a furry I knew in high school whose persona was one of the Dalmatians from 101 Dalmatians turned out to be the most controversial aspect of the whole movie. I didn't even mind his design, I just thought he was kind of cute looking. We get this fun little scene where we learn about him. He has these butterflies. I don't know, it's sweet. I would have really appreciated if we got to know more about him so we could actually care about him beyond a surface level, superficial He looks cute, but whatever. His design isn't even that bad, guys. Look, Steven even said it would be explained in the movie.
But we paid homage to Will Jacks, and it gets into like this bigger scheme of things that I can't get into. That's where it's at now.
Bigger things, huh? I can't wait to see what he means. Overall, I think this movie is well directed and shot. I could do with a little less grey and darkness, but for the most part, I think visually it looks fine. I think it's a step down from Bumblebee visually, but for Stephen Caple Jr.'s first $200 million movie, I think he did quite well. There's a big difference between filming this
Seemingly ahead on the scorecards, but Creed refuses.
and trying to shoot this. Every director has their own stories and experiences, and Steven gives the franchise a much needed new point of view, which is something we'll get more into real soon. I liked most of the robot designs in this movie. My favorites were probably RC, Wheeljack, Lady, Big Boobs, Optimus Prime, and Bumblebee. Is it controversial to say that Bumblebee is the best he's ever looked in this movie? I liked the rounded, cute design of him in the last movie, but this one's just so cool. I even brought a model kit of him, and I hate model kits. I've seen some people say that the aesthetics of the robots clash with each other, like some look like they're from Bayformers and others look like they're from G1. I can kind of see that point of view, but it didn't really bug me. Out of the main cast, the only one whose design bothered me was Mirage's, because it kind of reminded me of the weird human-looking Optimus Prime from Transformers 4 and 5 with the big boobs that didn't really look like he turned into anything, but whatever. Good luck making that into a toy, Hasbro. The soundtrack, especially the use of Unicron's theme, was really good. They could have gone all out and used the huge bombastic part of the theme that everybody knows, but I thought it was cool that they showed restraint and used the quieter, more melancholy part that starts off his theme. This is probably the only aspect of the movie they showed any restraint with. Airraiser's theme was cool, Scourge's theme was really effective, and it was nice to hear Arrival to Earth. At first I thought it was just there for nostalgia bait, but the less cynical side of me kind of saw it as playing to symbolize Optimus Prime reaching the end of his character arc, cementing himself as the Optimus Prime we know and love. I wish this theme played every time somebody decided to stop being racist. Scourge has these little frenzy minion things which he sends to go into small spaces throughout the movie. There's this cool scene in the museum where they're hunting Noah and Elena, and it's a nice moment of quiet tension. I've seen people say that this scene is lame because it's been done in a bunch of other movies, but just because something has been done better in other movies doesn't make it bad or any worse. It's still a good scene. I liked it when Optimus said,
"I do not want you going to that drive-in theater anymore."
I like the part where Mirage was stumbling around outside the window and the ensuing scene where Mirage speaks to Chris. It was a rare moment of clarity in the movie where characters just kind of talk about their feelings and stuff. I liked when Cheetor sat on the rock like a cat. I liked it when Wheeljack went. I liked this guy with the Twizzler, he was fun. This part when Noah and Mirage show up was really cool. I liked it when Mirage was messing with the lock. There was the part I liked when Optimus Primal made this face. Is that it? That's it? That's it. It's mostly just little things and stuff in the beginning. So what went wrong here? Why did it fall off so hard after such a solid start? I was really into the movie as a whole, and then Part 5. P.U. Oh, I'm so sorry, I meant Peru. When the Autobots get to Peru, Rise of the Beasts begins to feel like a completely different movie. It's night and day with how much the movie's drive just dies off at this point. What started as a fun, kinda interesting action movie quickly takes a nosedive into a messy slog almost as soon as our cast lands in Peru. Why is that? I've been trying to figure that out myself for a while now. But I guess a good place to start would be to take another look at our director for a sec. I don't know Stephen Caple Jr. personally, but he seems like a really cool, down-to-earth guy, and the whole cast and crew had nothing but nice things to say about him. I don't think it's controversial or wrong to say he has his own voice and niche in the types of movies he makes. That's fine, obviously. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. All three of his theatrically released movies have been about Black American culture in some capacity. The Land, Creed 2, and Rise of the Beasts are all about this in one way or another. For about 50 minutes, this movie feels like it has a voice. Like a fresh pair of eyes are viewing this franchise and are gonna show us a side of the Transformers story we've never seen before. If you want to be an asshole about it, it, yes, we've done this guy finds a car that is a robot song and dance many times, but that's not what I mean. We've never seen a Transformers story where a setting so ingrained in Black American culture, and that's awesome. This is what I was saying when I mentioned a couple minutes ago about how Steven's got his own unique point of view. It's definitely what any franchise needs every few years. But by the time Peru rolls around, it's like the style and the vision of the movie just vanishes. I could be completely wrong, and I don't want to point fingers, but it feels like Steven just really wanted to make a movie about all this stuff in New York, but probably didn't have a say in all this globe-trotting crap.
It's interesting having done all these Transformers. It's sort of like a pact we've made with the audience that we have to give you an experience that takes you to some far-off place, a lot of laughs, and some great action. So that's our aspiration.
A pact with the audience? The only pact Lorenzo has given me is the pact that I won't go near his house anymore. Actually, that was less of a pact and more of an obligation. And more like a restraining order.
The studio wanted to go to Peru. So it wasn't my idea. I put that out there. The studio's like, we want to go to Peru.
Oh yeah? That's interesting. Obviously, movies are shot out of order, so I'm not saying Steven lost all of his passion by the time they got to the Peru scenes, but there's such a palpable difference in energy between the scenes set in and around New York and those set in Peru. It feels like the movie goes on autopilot, and it starts to lose that identity that made it so unique in the first place. It's cool that we got to see an underrepresented part of the world in a big movie like this, and ever since I started making this video, I've learned a lot about Peru and its culture that I wouldn't have known otherwise. This is an undeniable good thing, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like we lost something by changing course like this. Like we had such a good thing going with the whole robots in disguise thing in New York, with a new angle to see this series from. But now we're standing around in broad daylight having pleasant conversations about the size of big boobs, big boobs.
On our film, it was tricky because we're like, how do we balance that now? Like, how do we sneak? How do we fall in between the cracks? And we're like, at night is a big thing, right? Not too many humans, a lot of robots, right? A lot of Transformers.
Why is he pretending the Autobots and Terracons aren't just standing around in broad daylight for everybody to see? You aren't fooling anybody.
At night is a big thing, right?
I find it really funny that he acts like this is some kind of ingenious solution to the issue, as if nighttime hasn't been used in everything ever to conceal weird goings on.
At night is a big thing, right?
Filmmaking is a collaborative process, and I think it would be a little disingenuous and wrong to start blindly blaming any one person for a movie not turning out great without understanding who exactly led to those decisions being made. I just made a case about how Steven is probably a victim of the studio here, but at the same time, it was him that wanted to do a Beast Wars movie. Like, you do realize that to make a Beast Wars movie, you probably have to go to some remote jungle like the Peruvian Amazonia, Borneo, the Congo Basin, or Birmingham, right?
And the first time the studio ever knocked on my door, it was for Bumblebee 2. And I was like, I don't want to do, I just came out from Creed 2, I don't want to do a sequel, you know? And so a year had gone by, or maybe two, right before COVID, and they said, we found out the story we want to tackle. We want to bring in Beast Wars. I was like, I know all about Beast Wars. I'm down for Beast Wars.
Or was it the studio? In some interviews, Steven claims that he pitched Beast Wars to the studio, and in others, he says the studio pitched Beast Wars to him. So which one is it, Steven? What, are you passing the blame or something? Again, this is all speculation, but if Steven had made the Bumblebee sequel and hadn't asked or been offered to do the Beasts, would they have gone to such an exotic location? Would it all have been set in New York? Did Steven make a mistake by asking to do the Beasts? Or did the producers make a mistake by taking a director out of his element? We'll probably never know. But it's not Steven's fault if the former is the case. Every great director makes mistakes. Tim Burton got too hooked on his style, Martin Scorsese made Boxcar Bertha, and Steven Spielberg ruined pop culture forever with Ready Player One. The point is, I don't think it's any one person's fault that this movie fell off like this. This doesn't mean that Steven, Lorenzo, or Joey Harold are completely absolved of any and all blame, but I can't in any good conscience accuse them of shit that I have no understanding of. I want to talk more about this later, so grab another pin and put that in Steven's face, okay? Don't lose that. Keep it safe for me. So anyway, what the hell is even happening? The Autobots and humans go to Peru to find the second half of the key so they can keep it safe from Scourge. They meet up with Wheeljack, who tells the heroes about how the key is in a church in the city of Cusco. They go and there's an Uncharted puzzle, and there's a temple, and there's these symbols, and Elena's gotta decipher them, and Hey, I got a question. Why are so many Transformers stories Tomb Raider treasure hunts? Transformers Armada, Transformers Prime, Revenge of the Fallen, The Last Knight, and now this? This movie doesn't do the treasure hunt story any worse than any other time it's been done, but it doesn't really do it any better either. If this is like your first Transformers movie, it ain't gonna be a problem, but I feel like we've seen this shit so many times and it's getting boring. Like, surely there's more stories you can tell in Transformers, right? We just got done with a fresh new story for these movies and we're back on another Michael Bay-like treasure hunt again. It's not even an interesting treasure hunt anyway, and it's just a complete lack of creativity in using the country's rich and unique history. Or at the very least, utilizing this amazing location they somehow managed to book. Like, you could have set it anywhere else and nothing would have really changed. At least Revenge of the Fallen and The Last Knight used the pyramids and Stonehenge respectively as the crux of their finales. The Last Knight had all that British shit, and it had the Parliament, and it was like Anthony Hopkins was there. Outside of the parade, they so easily managed to slip past.
It is a perfect day for a parade.
There's nothing here to tie the actual culture of Peru to the treasure or the story. There's a wider discussion to be had about the use of actual ancient civilizations in movies like this. Some say it's offensive to say that some of humanity's greatest achievements were actually created by aliens, and that it's disrespectful to the hundreds of thousands of people who worked their old asses off to create these ancient wonders, which is probably true. I have no say in this because I'm a bitchy white boy with no culture. Was it offensive to say the pyramids were actually built by alien robots in Transformers 2? Probably. Was it disrespectful to say the crystal skulls are actually an interdimensional alien race instead of handcrafted pieces of art made by some guy in the 19th century? I guess. But a lot of writers don't see it that way. They see these pieces of history as free story potential to do whatever they want with. Depending on who you ask, this is either fine or super disrespectful to whatever country's culture they're basing their work in. Again, I have no say in this, but I do think it's really interesting how the movie actually calls out this trope.
The Nazca lines? That was you guys, right?
We cannot claim credit for human ingenuity.
So the Maximals didn't at all intervene with anything on Earth, except for putting their keys in these ancient burial sites and being unwillingly painted in these images that Elena finds on a weirdly modern-looking website. That being said, I feel like the use of Machu Picchu in this movie is weirdly empty. And I don't just mean the way it's used in the script, but the way it's shot too. This is one of the greatest locations on the planet, with an expansive history that spans all the way back to the 14th century. And it's the backdrop for a boring exposition dump where a completely flat plane of grass is shot in a way that makes this wonder of the world look like the land I built my outhouse on. This beautiful work of human ingenuity is shot like any other location, as if it isn't this amazing spectacle. And if you didn't know it was a wonder of the world, you probably wouldn't know how big of a deal shooting here was just by looking at how these scenes are directed.
We shot on top of Machu Picchu, which has never been shot before.
That's literally a lie. Like, you just lied in front of millions of people. The Motorcycle Diaries and Inferion both shot here. They shot them well too. What, did you mean the first American movie to shoot here? Even that's not true. A movie called Secret of the Incas shot here in the 50s. Paramount made that movie as well. Did Steven lie, or did he just not do any research?
But anyway, the mission. Follow me.
This movie marks the first time the Maximals have been plonked into a modern setting. In every other show, the Maximals have been hanging around in either the far past or the far future. Putting these nature-loving peacekeepers in a modern setting is a really cool idea, especially when you discover their mission in the movie, which is to protect young worlds from threats out of their control and preserve life on the verge of extinction. The movie, probably completely by accident, almost challenges the Maximals' mission by putting them with this tribe in the jungle. When you take history into account and realize why there are so few of these people he's watched over for hundreds of years, why they are hidden and so remote, it makes you start to think about the horrors Primal has witnessed. What atrocities have humans committed against these people? What do these peacekeepers do when the biggest threat facing humanity isn't Unicron or Scourge, but humanity itself? They've lived long enough to witness how humanity has taken their home, these lush vistas and rich ecosystems, and slowly destroyed it, piece by piece, because of their own greed, forcing the indigenous people of the jungle to become more and more marginalized and vulnerable. What does that do to them? When you start to really think about it, you realize that Optimus Primal should have been the one who hated humanity. not Optimus Prime. Given what he's witnessed in all his time, maybe he has to be the one to learn that humanity isn't so bad, right? Optimus Prime and Bumblebee... Oh, sorry, he's dead. Optimus Prime and Mirage and maybe Noah could all be the ones who teach him this lesson. It's much more justifiable and would get the message about unity across in a much more satisfying way. I'm not acclaimed writer of the hit show Obi-Wan Kenobi Jobby Harold, so I'm sure there's a reason they didn't take this very obvious open goal opportunity to do this character arc that Steven so desperately wanted to do for some reason. Maybe it would have actually given Primal something to do in the movie, but we'll talk about that later. Actually, speaking of the indigenous peoples of Peru, I mentioned the Maximals have been friends with this ancient tribe that's watched over them for hundreds of years, right?
He and his family are the last descendants of a tribe that has watched over us for hundreds of years. When we arrived,
What I'm about to talk about isn't really a criticism of the movie, I just want to talk about this as someone that finds history really interesting. In 1532, the Spanish army conquered the Inca Empire under the leadership of Conquistador Francisco Pizarro. They captured Incan Emperor Atahualpa in a famous battle known as the Battle of Cajamarca, where they brutally strangled him to death with a garrote and stole his riches. So, do you think Optimus Primal sided with the European colonizers that stole the Incas' land? If he hadn't, then surely Emperor Atahualpa wouldn't be dead, and the Spanish army would have failed their conquest, and Peru would never have been established. Like, the options are either Optimus Primal allowed his human friends to be horribly murdered while he hid and did nothing, or he sided with Conquistador Pizarro and decided colonization is okay.
and together we protected its people.
Yeah, just don't ask him where he was in November of 1532. But all these missed opportunities and historical questions are the least of our problems when the action kicks off and the chase along the switchback begins. It's a competently shot action set piece with some cool moments, but any excitement or tension is removed from the scene, not just because we don't care about any of these characters, but because the whole scene is edited so poorly. I'm not saying it's like Quantum of Solace levels of being completely unreadable, but the entire chase is so choppily put together that I'm actually amazed it made it into the final movie. I didn't even realize what was so bad about it until the deleted scenes for this movie came out and we saw the full uncut chase scene. And then that's where the confusion began. Not that I wasn't already confused by the scene itself, but I became even more confused when I saw what the scene was going to be. In the original cut of the movie, it starts with this huge shot of the battlefield we're about to see this fight go down on. Plus, there's all these shots where the camera pulls back to establish the scale, the geography, and the location of each of these three individual fights that are happening. In the original cut, there is a cause and effect to the action, whereas in the final cut, the whole thing feels super disjointed and weird, like all of these events could be happening miles apart. It's so weird to me that they butchered this whole set piece so hard in the final cut of the movie. Like, did you run out of time? Was it an intentional creative choice to make the action scene worse? Like here, we see Scourge come from above and tackle Optimus off the edge of the road. Then we get this shot of Mirage that shows us where he is. Then we see Mirage turn down the hill. In our heads, we know that Mirage has descended to the road below because of this shot at the start, right? So when Optimus and Scourge are seen tumbling down above, we're not like, how did they get there? We get it because we've been shown the geography of the scene. RC and Wheeljack take up the rear and come tumbling down the hill after Optimus and Scourge. Again, because everything has been so clearly defined. When we see these boulders come crashing down onto Mirage, we understand why and where they're coming from. In the final cut of the movie, for some reason, Optimus and Scourge fall down the hill right at the start of the scene rather than in the middle. Then suddenly, Mirage is being assaulted by debris from above and you're like, where the hell did that come from? The editing is so weird here. He was right in front of him and now he's below. Then suddenly RC appears somewhere in the scene. Unlike the original cut that showed us that RC and Wheeljack were trying to catch up to the others, here she just pops into the scene with no warning. Where is she? Where is anybody? We can deduce that these two are close behind Mirage because Big Boobs attaches these things to Lady and turns around to fire at them. But then we cut away to Optimus and Scourge still falling down the hill, and when we cut back, Mirage and Lady are gone. Then they go flying down the hill and oh, here's Mirage. Optimus and Scourge go tumbling overhead again. And then we get one of the few shots that actually tells us where everybody is, but it's too late now because the scene's over. I know I keep saying this stupid word, but the geography of the scene is hardly conveyed to us at all, and it makes this whole sequence feel like a collection of unrelated beats. What makes it truly strange to me is the fact that it was fine in the original cut, and then they butchered it into the messy scene we have now. Again, there's cool moments here, but overall the entire sequence is so weird and messy, making it unsatisfying to watch. It's not exciting or fun because you're so busy just trying to work out what the hell is going on. When you're making any action scene, let alone a chase scene with as many moving parts as this, presenting the space is like a requirement. So is keeping the positions of every member within the space. Do I really have to explain it? Is this something that needs to be said? Did nobody notice that this scene makes no sense when you cut it up like a 2009 AMV? This is your big exciting midpoint action scene? It sucks. Do you enjoy disjointed shots of robots shooting at enemies off screen? Do you like random debris flying overhead that might as well be coming from an air cannon? Do you want to see the only character you care about doing nothing in the whole sequence except drive in a straight line, use none of his cool abilities, and contribute nothing to the attempted exciting action? Well, do I have an action scene for you? Some people watching this video that might not be editor-brained probably didn't even realize there was this much wrong with the scene, which is okay. Not everybody picks up on these things, but trust me, somewhere deep in the recesses of your mind, you noticed this. To quote a famous sociopathic murderer, you may not have noticed it, but your brain did. One thing I'll say about this movie is that it's teaching me a lot of cool stuff about Peru that I never knew before. I've always been fascinated by historical digs like this, so it was cool to learn more about all this stuff they mentioned in the movie. Like here, the Autobots arrive during Inti Raymi, which is a yearly festival held in Peru to celebrate the sun god Inti. I discovered that the parade they see in this movie starts at the Coricancha Inca temple, passes through the square as seen here, before a final festivity is held at Sacsayhuaman, which they prepare for all day with Inca beverages and animal sacrifices. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you any of this. It's because Sacsayhuaman, the big final step of the parade that thousands of tourists and Cusco residents hang around at all day to see the end of the parade, is right fucking here. I can't tell if this is just because nobody did any research or they really just thought nobody would notice. I'm sure the people of Peru noticed. Why would you half-ass a huge detail like this? Can I cancel Stephen Capel Jr. for cultural insensitivity?
A little racist, hermano.
I'm not trying to be, yo.
I'm just kidding, it's not that big of a deal. Learn to take a joke, just like how you learn to like the Bayformers movies. But anyway, it's also during the Peru section of the movie that all of the script's problems begin to unravel before our eyes. Not just a poorly edited main action set piece of the second act, but the character work too. It makes you start going like, Part 6. Who? What? Huh? The script is full of holes, and I don't mean plot holes, I'm not CinemaSins. I'm talking entire scenes and character beats that just feel like they're missing. Basic fundamentals of character writing, world building, and story structure are absent, and it's what gives this movie its patented dry, stale, and empty feeling that many have associated it with. One of my favorite examples of this is that the first thing we see Noah doing in this movie is fixing a VCR or something. This is our first time meeting this guy, and this is our first impression of him. He's a tinkerer. He fixes stuff as a side hustle. But that setup never has a payoff. I thought he was gonna like fix some important device in the climax or have some technical know-how that would come in useful later, but he never did. When we first meet Charlie and Bumblebee, we see that she's really into music, right? This isn't just about character building, it plays a role in the story later on. Her big collection of tapes is how Bumblebee finds his voice. What first appears to be nothing more than set dressing is actually a sneaky little setup for a major plot point in the movie. By the way, I hear ya. You're probably screaming at your screen right now. What about the scene where Noah fixes Mirage right at the end after the credits? Now, I could be an asshole and say, how was Noah able to revive a dead alien robot with a spanner and a human's understanding of technology? But everyone was thinking that, so I won't bother. This scene has no bearing on, like, anything relating to Noah. What do I mean by this? Well, first, let's talk about Noah's arc in this movie. No, not the boat, you idiot. I meant the character arc of Noah Diaz, the character in Transformers Rise of the Beast. We're told explicitly at the start of the movie that Noah isn't good in a team. It's given a whole scene to let us know that this is a big part of his character.
You don't know anything about me.
I know you don't know how to be part of a team.
This is very clearly the setup for his journey throughout the movie. But him not working in a team isn't shown to us at any point in Rise of the Beasts. He's a loving and caring son who's willing to do anything to get his little brother the treatment he needs. He works with his Twizzler friend to steal cars. He works with the Autobots to go into the museum. He works with Elena to escape the museum. He works with Elena to get the artifact, and so on. We are told he's not good in a team. But then the movie shows him working well in a team not even 2 minutes later. The closest we come to him not working well in a team is when he decides he's going to destroy the key. But that's not really about teamwork. We've already established Noah is completely in the right in feeling that way, and the movie hardly does anything to tell you otherwise. This isn't about working in a team. That is a difference of opinion. The reason Noah helps the Autobots in the first place is because Mirage offers him money that he can use to help his little brother get the treatment he needs. Now, you may disagree, but personally, I do not see this as a selfish action. The truly selfish thing to do would be to say no, since you'd be putting yourself above the health of your little brother, right? Going off of this scene where we're told he isn't a good team player, is this meant to imply that his actions throughout the movie are selfish up until the point he and Optimus Prime begin seeing eye to eye? Stealing a car from somebody you don't know. Yeah, that sucks, it's pretty selfish. Breaking into a museum to steal an artifact that will save the world so you can get enough money to pay for your little brother's hospital care. How is that an evil act? How is that at all selfish? Noah does not change in this movie. As likable and charming as Anthony Ramos is, and as good as Noah's first few scenes are, he ends up making no substantial change throughout the movie other than making friends with giant alien robots. He's handed his reward for going along with the Autobots at the end of the movie, having learned absolutely nothing. But at least he has a job now. So going back to this post-credit scene, how does this expand upon what has already been laid out? The scene does not develop or conclude any kind of huge character arc. It's there as sequel bait and to undermine the possibility that a character could possibly die in this universe. Why do we need stakes when a human with a wrench can bring our heroes back from the dead? It kind of feels like something that was tacked on at the very last minute because it was. It feels like a reshoot because it is. If this wasn't in the movie originally, what was the point of telling us that Noah is a tech whiz? At least telling us he's a soldier has somewhat of a payoff when he starts fighting huge swarms of robots in a blue beetle suit at the end of the movie. But our very first impression of him isn't important according to the movie. It's possibly the most important part of writing a character, how we're introduced to them. You might see this as nitpicking, but this shit is writing 101, and I'm actually amazed that movies are still coming out where this stuff doesn't happen. If it's not important to this character, to this story, or give us any insight into anything the director may be trying to say, then why show us? Why highlight it and make it our first impression of him if it doesn't have any reason to be there? Like, imagine if when they introduce Frodo in The Lord of the Rings, it shows him with a huge collection of crack pipes, and he spends a whole 45 seconds showing everybody in the Shire his crack pipe collection because he's really proud of them. You wouldn't be sitting there like, oh yeah, that tracks. You'd be like, what does Frodo having a crack pipe collection have to do with his journey to Mount Doom? The end of Bumblebee left the inevitable sequel open to do pretty much whatever it wanted to do. It could go into a G1 route or its own thing or whatever. But something I really liked was how the movie left its own lore completely up in the air. We're told so little about what actually started the war on Cybertron or what the Decepticons stand for. While some people may be upset about this, I thought it was fine. Bumblebee didn't need to tell us these things because it didn't really matter in the overall story. With Rise of the Beasts, Cybertron plays a key role. It's Optimus Prime's goal to return there. It may never be seen, but it's still a key component of his character and his arc.
In Bumblebee, if you remember, he left Bumblebee being like, all right, we're going to seek refuge on Earth, but we're going to go back and stop the Decepticons. Like, that's a goal of his, you know? And it still is in this film.
Like I said during the Optimus Prime segment, we have no reason to care for it outside of the fact Optimus Prime does. And the fact that the movie assumes we already care about Cybertron makes this, again, feel like a sequel to a movie that was never made. In Rise of the Beasts, the Decepticons are not mentioned once. You know, the bad guys in the last movie, the whole reason the first movie happened, the whole reason they're on Earth in the first place, the main antagonists of the whole franchise. Where are they? Did the Decepticons know the Autobots are on Earth? According to a deleted scene, the Decepticons keep sending lackeys to Earth and they keep dying. Surely they gotta know Optimus Prime is there if they keep getting killed, right? I'm sure people had certain expectations when it came to a Bumblebee sequel, but maybe that's on those that thought these movies would actually flow into each other. Even then, the Decepticons were such a huge part of the last movie, and their exclusion in Rise of the Beast just makes Bumblebee feel like it doesn't even matter. Like, all this stuff, not important, don't worry about it. There's an even bigger threat you have to worry about now called Unicron. and somebody way scarier than Megatron named Scourge. That's another thing, where the hell is Megatron? You know, the franchise's main villain? Again, I get it for Bumblebee because that was a smaller scale story and his inclusion would have made the movie worse. Having Bumblebee go toe-to-toe with Megatron at the end of the movie would have been a bit of a leap. But now, we've got two options. Either this is a prequel and he's frozen under Hoover Dam like he was in the first movie, or he's ruling Cybertron. Like, somebody's got to be in charge of the Decepticons if he's not there. Starscream? Shockwave? Anybody? Actually, where is that base that Bumblebee and Optimus Prime set out to create? Like, that was Bumblebee's mission, right?
You will travel there and establish a base for us.
That's the whole reason you guys went there. Is it in, like, Bakersfield, California or something, and you just never went back to it the whole movie? Is this your base? Yeah, nice base, bozos. What have you been doing for 7 years anyway? I thought the whole point of coming here was to regroup and stage some kind of counterattack to reclaim Cybertron. How did you get here, Optimus? Did you use one of those pods that Bumblebee escaped on? Don't those get destroyed on impact? Did nobody bring a ship? What, did you expect someone to squeeze all 5 of you guys into one of these little pods? Why would you use these if they get destroyed when you land? That just leaves you stranded. You can't leave, idiot. Also, does he really expect to take down the Decepticons with just 6 Autobots? Wheeljack and Stratosphere were off doing something else, so are there others? Why isn't the movie establishing this pretty important information? Is Optimus Prime's plan really just to use the transwarp key to teleport to Cybertron and immediately get gunned down by the hundreds, if not thousands of Decepticons that forced him to flee in the last movie? What kind of plan is that? Is Optimus Prime stupid? The singular reference to Bumblebee in Rise of the Beast made me really happy when I first saw the movie.
They are my friends. I know one was good to you, baby.
But now it just makes me feel kind of frustrated because this movie makes so many leaps to just completely ignore that movie and the universe it was setting up.
I feel like the most pressure is probably following, if you were asking the pressure, like the sequel act. Because Bumblebee was really enjoyable. Like, it was very intimate. You were able to connect to the characters again. And now you go, now Optimus Prime is there. And now the Maximals are there. How are people going to feel about them?
I'd hate to accuse anybody of anything, but it feels like Steven just wants to do his own thing, regardless of how it's going to affect the last movie. That might be good for him creatively, but it's not good for the audience that wants a coherent set of movies that you can, like, engage with and follow and understand. It begins to make this movie feel like a bunch of things Stephen Cable Jr. wanted to do instead of things that should have happened in favor of the story. Like, he just wanted to see the stuff he likes about Transformers without considering that it might not all fit into the movie.
One of the ways Unicron came about was that, you know, as a fan myself, I wanted to see it and how I felt after the last night, being like, I want more of that. Like, at the tag of the movie, I'm like, that's the film I want to see. Now, being in a position where I can do that, and also hearing the fans as well, like, it's really cool to put that stamp in and give that guy a voice.
In an already completely stuffed movie, why add something as universe-shattering as Unicron? That's insane. If you want a funny night in, I'd recommend a little activity where you watch Bumblebee and Rise of the Beast back to back. The jump in stakes from one movie to the next is laughable. It's so funny. You still got that pin in Steven's face, right? Okay, just making sure. To be fair, if you were given the chance to make a Transformers movie, you'd probably ask for some crazy stuff too, right? I know I would. I'd ask for a scene where, like, Fortress Maximus is laying in bed reading a book, and then I come into the room and Fort Max says, "PaperPlane, what are you doing here?" Then I just don't say anything, but I slowly approach him and blow out a candle that's on the bedside table. The room's in complete darkness, but then you start hearing the sounds of somebody knocking outside. The door flies open and the light turns on, and it's another me, but this is me from the future, and I look at me and Fort Max and say, "PaperPlane, I am you from the future. A great battle is ahead, and you must lead the charge with me, your future self." But then, because I'm a time traveler and I'm not in any rush, I see that I'm with Fortress Maximus and I say, I'll leave you for like 5 minutes. And then future me leaves and makes a cup of coffee and has like a whole bag of Balsan Choco Leibniz cookies because we don't have those in the future anymore. Anyway, much like Cybertron, I felt like the movie gave us no reason to care for the Autobot cast. I've already talked about Optimus Prime, but the rest? We all know these characters. We've known them forever, but I shouldn't have to care about something just because I did in another continuity separate from this one. Using another recent example, the Batman made an effort to make me care about their version of Batman and Bruce Wayne. More uniquely, it made me care about Gotham City more than any other version of Batman has on screen. It would have been really easy to ride off of the wave of knowledge accumulated over the last 100 or whatever years of Batman existing and just drop us into a world that the filmmakers assume we already care about. But taking the time to get us invested paid off in that movie. It's what makes the entire finale of that movie work. I mentioned this earlier, but Mirage gives us a little speech that basically tells us he's a rebellious turbo-revving young punk who's kinda infatuated with humanity. Nobody else gets a scene like this. We're hardly told anything about the rest of our heroes. We're given hardly any reasons to care about the robots in Rise of the Beast outside of the fact that we as fans know versions of them from other universes. We care about Bumblebee because of the previous movie, sure, but he gets killed right away to make room for the new Kid Appeal character. What's weird to me is that in the follow-up to the movie All About Him, Bumblebee is reduced to what Optimus Prime was in the previous movie, a plot point to drive our main character forward. Bumblebee isn't a character in this movie, he's there to die and get Optimus Prime super mad. I did notice when I was watching a bunch of the behind the scenes stuff for this movie that they keep mentioning the fact that they managed to get Porsche to agree to do this movie.
I think working with Porsche, they're always very hands-on on a movie.
I don't know if this is a crackpot theory or whatever, but do you think somebody wanted to make a Porsche front and center in this movie just because they'd managed to get the company to agree to work with them? They sponsored the premiere and the South by Southwest Film Festival.
The statues in our Porsche, of course, our Porsche over there.
They never mentioned that RC is a Ducati or that Wheeljack is a VW or that Optimus Prime is a Freightliner FLA.
Mirage, as he's a Porsche.
VW merged with Porsche in 2011 and VW heavily sponsored Bumblebee because he was a Beetle in that movie. But he became a Camaro at the end, so did they want to collaborate again? Actually, VW owns Ducati as well, but I guess that's not as important as the Porsche.
You know he's fun because his car form is a Porsche.
It's a Porsche.
Is that why they killed Bumblebee? So they could make a deal with Porsche? It sure looks like that.
Porsche, they've been phenomenal to work with. They're great cars, obviously.
Did they prioritize money over telling a story? Isn't Hollywood just magical? Was Bumblebee's death a soulless corporate move and not something anybody wanted to do? Like, they must have known nobody was gonna buy this, right? It's arguably even more cynical than when they killed off Optimus Prime in the '86 movie. That was to sell a new wave of toys. This is to promote a car that the movie's target audience has no chance of ever owning.
Porsche.
It's
a Porsche. Porsche for many reasons, right?
Mirage is cool and likable, but he doesn't have much of an arc. He just kind of stays the same throughout the whole movie. Like in the behind the scenes, they go into all this deep lore about Mirage being a rich kid that isn't communicated to the audience at all. I'd hate to assume that I can do a better job than acclaimed writer of the hit show Obi-Wan Kenobi, Joby Harold, but what if Mirage kind of started out as a rebellious and selfish asshole that slowly changes into a loyal friend of Noah's by the end of the movie, maybe mirroring Noah's non-existent arc as well about teamwork and stuff. It's better than nothing, right? When this movie was coming out, I was kind of excited to see another big Autobot ensemble cast, because those are always really fun. Transformers Animated, Transformers Prime, Transformers Rescue Bots, Transformers Earthspark, Beast Wars, and arguably the first Michael Bay movie are all great examples of this trope. 4 or 5 Autobots or Maximals or whatever working together, each with their own distinct quirks and dynamics that bounce off of each other, you get me. It's always a lot of fun. Well, almost always. Obviously, with a TV series, you have more time to flesh out these characters, but loads of movies give time to flesh out big ensemble casts in a satisfying way. Movies like Aliens, Ocean's 11, The Lord of the Rings, Ghostbusters, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Star Wars, The Suicide Squad, The Princess Bride, and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Rise of the Beast characters are so bare bones and empty and given so little time to breathe that you end up feeling absolutely nothing for them at any point during the movie. You don't care when they're in danger, and it makes the whole thing super boring. The exceptions to this are Noah, Mirage, Elena, and Bumblebee sort of. I'm being generous by including Bumblebee since we only care about him because he was the main character of the previous movie. Bumblebee is hardly in Rise of the Beast anyway, so it doesn't matter. Starting with Wheeljack, as much as I liked him, I only really liked him because I thought his design was cute, but he's just there to point the others in the right direction, and then he just kinda hangs around in the background for the rest of the movie, doing nothing. All we learn about him is that he likes butterflies and that he needs to fix his power steering. His official character bio says he's an ingenious inventor, an intrepid scientist, and a crack dealer. None of this is conveyed in the movie.
Now, pay attention, 007.
Hey, have you ever seen any of the James Bond movies? You know Q, James Bond's gadget guy? What if Wheeljack took on a role like that, supplying the team with gadgets and weapons as they arrive in Peru? Maybe he's the one that gives Noah the gauntlet thing. It's not a big deal, but it at least gives Wheeljack a reason to be there. In almost every James Bond movie, Q shows up, gives James Bond some stuff, James Bond does like an annoyed face and is like, how is this ever gonna be useful? And then it saves his ass later on, sometimes in extremely comedic or memorable ways. He only ever shows up for like one scene in every movie, but his presence is felt throughout with his wacky gadgets that always get James Bond out of scrapes. You could literally just do that with him and, I don't know, RC or whoever, and it would at least make you sorta remember him. And don't come to me with the whole, they already did Q in the Michael Bay movies, so we're just never allowed to use that trope again? Is that what you're saying? The average moviegoer doesn't even remember Q. What's your point? It's just a character trope, and Q happens to be the most famous example of that trope. Just like how Mirage is the most famous example of the character devised entirely for money laundering purposes trope. Actually, why didn't Wheeljack give Noah the Iron Man armor? Or the glove thingy? Wheeljack's meant to be the tech guy of the group, but Mirage just pulled this human-sized gauntlet thing out of his ass.
I guess it does look better on me.
Just don't ask what part of my body it came from.
Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I don't like thinking about Transformers having dicks. Stop it. You're freaking me out with all these anatomy jokes. I said stop it.
Every single scene matters. There's no scene that does not matter. Every word matters. Every line matters.
So did Mirage build the gauntlet? Did Wheeljack slip it into his hand off screen? He's able to turn his entire body into a stupid Iron Man suit for Noah later on. If he's able to make all this cool tech, then why is Wheeljack even here? I guess you could say that this is here to reinforce Mirage and Noah's friendship, but it don't make no sense. If you really wanted to go down that route, maybe Mirage could be like, hey, Wheeljack, give my human friend a cool gadget. And then maybe Wheeljack could be like unsure about giving a human a gadget, but Mirage like reassures him that he's cool or whatever. You could keep the whole Q gadget thing while also growing Mirage and Noah's bond, James Bond. I'm not saying everybody in the main cast has to have a huge character journey or be constantly on screen, but so many of these characters fall so far to the wayside that it begins to make you wonder why they're even in this movie. Whenever these characters are in any sort of peril, I feel absolutely nothing because I don't care about them. It makes the movie so boring. There is nothing done with this huge team they've assembled. You could remove the majority of these characters and the movie wouldn't change in the slightest. I know you could say the same about the first movie because really, the only Autobots that need to be there for the story to happen are Bumblebee and Optimus Prime, but at the very least, these pointless characters are given, you know, character. I hate to keep comparing this to the Michael Bay movies, but I feel like the original 5 Autobots were given so much personality in their short time on screen. They banter with each other, they get into hijinks and stuff. You're given little insights into their personalities, and it's not great, but it's the bare minimum, which is still better than nothing. There's a whole scene in the first movie where we're introduced to them one by one and we learn something about each of them. Optimus is the leader, Bumblebee is the scout, Ratchet is the medic, Ironhide is the muscle, and Jazz is there to die later. What's the Autobots' roles in Rise of the Beasts? Optimus Prime is the leader, Wheeljack is the techie who does absolutely no tech support, so I don't know if you can even count that because the movie says nothing about it. Those two are obvious. Mirage is the scout, I guess, but then so is Bumblebee. Actually, I'd say he takes on the muscle role because he drops out of Stratosphere and turns the tide of... I didn't even mention Stratosphere, oh my god. I thought RC was going to be like a tactician from this scene where she scans Noah and tries to work out how to get the key from the museum, but then she doesn't do anything for the rest of the movie. She just kind of stands in the background while other people explain what's going on. I know they wanted to give Optimus Prime his big speech before the ending, but wouldn't it have made more sense for RC to make the plan of attack? We established that she's a strategist from her opening scene. You can still have Optimus go off about teamwork and stuff, you know? Where's that hologram coming from anyway? Who's projecting that? It just appears out of nowhere. RC projected the hologram earlier, they could have made her project it. Were they afraid to give her something to do? Out of the main 5 Autobots in this movie, RC gets the shortest end of the stick. At least we learn a little about Wheeljack, even if it's just that he likes butterflies. RC is given so little to say or do that it's actually kinda sad.
It's an honor to be here, to be the voice of RC. Stephen Cable Jr. Grew up with the franchise, as we all did, and he finally implemented all the things and details that we've wanted to see for so long, including giving RC a little backstory too. So,
what backstory? What are you talking about? Are you okay?
But she's also disciplined. Like, she gets everybody together. She reels in. She's like, what's the plan? Let's execute. She's on time, on task, on a mission. Her weakness, I don't know.
When?
I don't know.
Actually, after reading her bio, I found out RC is a sharpshooter. Can you be a sharpshooter without a sniper rifle? Those don't look particularly long range or accurate. Yeah, great job, sharpshooter. Hey, speaking of sharpshooting, did you ever notice how sharply they shot Scourge in this movie? Snatched waist, slutty thighs. They knew what they were doing, right? I think somebody at Paramount realized that if you make the robots hot, it leads to a potential 0.22% increase in revenue. I mean, it worked on me. Anyway, I just realized I haven't talked about Scourge very much. I think at times, Scourge is a pretty okay villain, but most of the time, he's this boring, grovelly weirdo that kind of came across as a weird fusion of IDW Tarn G1 Galvatron and Eddie Munster. I don't even know what that means. Out of all the villains in these movies, I say he's like in the lower echelon. Megatron in the first 3 was a cool villain, and Shadow was too. Scourge feels like he has no drive or agency outside of serving his master. He's a subordinate, and a boring one at that. You can make a subordinate interesting, but this ain't it. He's like a teaching assistant in school who has to take over the class while the teacher's sick or whatever, and they end up just making everybody really bored. So you try to get a rise out of them by being disruptive in class, but then they have a breakdown from the stress and try to kill the whole class with a compass. You could say the same for Shatter in Bumblebee, since she's also just a subordinate for Megatron, but at least Shatter is her own character. She also wants to get her boss down to earth, but she at least doesn't have her boss popping up every now and then to completely overshadow her. Having Megatron out of the picture in Bumblebee makes Shatter look like a bigger threat than she probably is, which is exactly what the movie is going for. Having Megatron pop up to tell her what to do would have undermined her as the main antagonist. You kind of forget that she's just a random soldier because so many of the movie's scenes are about her and what she and Dropkick are getting up to with the humans. I mean, even Dropkick, Shatter's forgettable sidekick, has little moments that give him a lot of character.
We are Decepticon peacekeepers, patrolling the galaxy.
What are you doing? This is humiliating.
Big Boobs and Lady hardly get that outside of generic villain dialogue that tells us Lady is evil and Big Boobs wants to fight people. I'm just saying, if Scourge had any motivations of his own that didn't involve him sucking up to his master, he'd be a lot more interesting. He's tortured by Unicron for messing up. So like, he's clearly gotta have feelings about the fact his boss abuses him, right? Maybe he's super mad at Unicron and secretly wishes he could take him down. Or maybe he's loyal to a fault, and Unicron has tortured him for so long now that he's got Stockholm Syndrome or something. I'm just throwing out ideas here. It's better than him just blindly serving his master and showing very little character of his own outside of the fact he's got a huge ass, and he sounds like he doesn't care about a single thing that ever happens to him throughout the movie.
Awaken my dark master.
This is a wider issue with the movie overall. They have a stacked cast of award-winning actors, one of which is coming off of winning the Best Actress Oscar, and you give them jack shit. Not just in terms of character, but in terms of, you know, acting. The ones that have something to do, like where they have to actually emote, are either really monotone anyway or give career worst performances. Peter Cullen is pretty, you know, Peter Cullen-y in this movie. It's not my favorite Optimus Prime performance from him, but it's, you know, good.
Autobots, transform and roll out to a theater near you.
Same goes for Big Boobs and Peter Davidson, but I already talked about him. Outside of these guys, the rest of the voice cast is just so weird sounding. I'm sure these people are great actors. In fact, I know some of these people are great actors. So what's going on here? Like, this guy voicing Unicron, Coleman Domingo, is really good. I saw him in Euphoria and he rocked that shit. So I was pretty excited when he was announced as the voice of Unicron.
Scour the universe and find where the Maximals have gone.
He wasn't bad in the movie, but his voice had a severe lack of presence and gravitas that the Orson Welles version did. Orson Welles voiced Unicron at 1% of his power back in the 80s and gave the best performance in the whole of the 86 movie. I'm not expecting Coleman Domingo to be on par with one of the greatest actors who ever lived, but there's something about his performance that doesn't sell me on the fact a literal planet is talking. At the very least, he's delivering his lines well, with, you know, emotion. Peter Dinklage, on the other hand, sounds like he's absolutely dragging his feet through the mud at times.
Master, the reinforcements!
Why did you use that take, you know, the worst one? You just got soaked in lava and now your face is grinding against this spinny thing. It looks like it hurts. Look at all those sparks. You want to try that again?
Master, the reinforcements!
Okay, whatever. I like Peter Dinklage. He's a pretty great actor. I liked him in 3 Billboards and Game of Thrones, and he just seems like a cool guy. But in almost every instance of him doing voiceover work, he's been really bad.
I'm picking up fallen activity. Heavier than normal. Something's got them worked up.
Destiny comes to mind, but Rise of the Beast is a much better example. There is nothing unique or distinct about his voice work in this movie, and it's so boring.
It wasn't one where he had to come to the table and say, this is my voice, I'm gonna just use this. He really tried to embody Scourge.
We'll see about that. Kill them.
Not that Scourge has all that much going on anyway, but actors can elevate characters through their performances alone. Just look at the two leads of this movie. I said almost every instance of him doing voiceover work about 20 seconds ago, and I only said almost because I thought he was pretty good in the Angry Bird movies.
You might want to shield your eyes from the sparkle of those trophies. How many? I have no idea. Countless, I'm sure. 13.
Obviously, he displays a wider range of emotions in Angry Birds than he does in both instances of him voicing a robot. Maybe he took the voicing a robot thing too literally, I don't know. I started wondering who the voice director was, but I sat through the movie's credits and looked it up on IMDb and it didn't have one. I can only assume that Stephen Cable Jr. did the voice directing himself, which isn't bad, I guess, but directing a voice actor is way different than directing a normal actor. We've already established that Cable Jr. is a fine director, and for his first crack at a big action movie like this, he did pretty well. But I can't tell if he's not entirely skilled at directing voice actors or if Peter Dinklage just didn't care. I want to give them both the benefit of the doubt and assume some rogue sound mixer used every one of the worst takes for each line to get back at Peter Dinklage for cutting in front of him in the line at the Olive Garden across the street from the studio. But there's just something so clearly wrong here. But then again, I don't think even the greatest actors to ever live could deliver some of this dialogue.
Oh, they're flying now? Who the hell are these guys?
Have you been to Cybertron? People fly there. Wait, why does this sound so familiar?
Oh, they're flying now? Oh, they fly now! They're flying now? They fly now? They fly now!
There's so many lines of dialogue in Rise of the Beasts that probably sounded really cool in the writers' heads, but they either make absolutely no sense or are just super uncool in practice.
I enjoy that look of confusion when an inferior being meets a higher power.
What?
Time to show you the real power of a prime!
Huh? Is the power of a prime the ability to decapitate somebody? If that's the power of the primes, then what's the Legacy Evolution, or the Combiner Wars, or the Velocitron Speedia 500?
But if you destroy that key, our home will be lost forever. We do not have to choose.
Like, we don't have to choose to go back to Cybertron? But you had to choose. You chose at the end of the movie.
Don't, Prime. I can give you everything you want, then die.
Was that meant to be cool? That was lame as hell. That wasn't clever or witty or anything.
He could return. Let him come. United, we will destroy him.
Like, you want Unicron to come back and try and eat the Earth? Is it just because you want to fight him again? Surely you want to keep him away from Earth, right? Are you sure you're not xenophobic anymore?
Every word matters, every line matters. Like, something I love about Steven is he doesn't waste a word, not a moment, anything.
Kill them.
When you make a movie with as many characters as this, hell, as many writers as this, it begins to make you yearn for Bumblebee's small scale. You could have a big Autobot and Decepticon cast like this in a movie and flesh them out while also telling a complete story. It's totally possible, but there's so much other shit in this movie that feels so pointless and dead-end and empty that could be removed with zero consequence to the overall story. Like, the Terracons could have been anybody. They could have been a faction of bounty hunters or something. And Unicron? Why is he even here?
I mean, I gave him a new villain, which was Unicron and the Terracon Squad. I just felt like, as a fan, we've been tiptoeing around Unicron, and all the other films kind of like hinted towards him towards the end. And I just really want to expand the universe, and I felt like he was that perfect source to do so, because he tells us there's another world out there. There's more Transformers out there. It's not just Autobots and Decepticons.
Oh, hey, don't remove that pin just yet. We're getting there. For what is supposedly the best Transformers movie ever, and a movie that treats the franchise with dignity and respect, it really doesn't give a shit about the majority of its legacy characters. I'd argue, out of the main cast, the three most famous and recognizable of them are Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, and RC. What do they do with them? They turn Optimus Prime into a space racist, Bumblebee is dead, and RC, the first female Autobot to have a major role in a Transformers movie since the '86 film, is a plank of wood that says and does absolutely nothing of note in the whole movie.
You have Optimus and Bumblebee, and everybody loves them, so the thing they love is there as well.
This is me being generous to the Maximals' presence in the movie as well. Somehow the Maximals are treated even worse than the rest of our heroes. It starts to make you wonder why the Maximals are even here. Oh yeah, about that. Part 7. Maximize into a better movie. For a movie called Rise of the Beasts sure don't do a lot of rising. The only beast rising is the one in my house. See, I managed to tame a wild ape I found in the woods, and I took him home to raise him. I named him Taquito after the Japanese voice actor for Optimus Primal since the original Beast Wars. He really wanted to see this movie because it had a big monkey in it. Afterwards, I taught him how to shoot heroin. When we all heard that the Maximals were going to be in this movie, we all had a lot of questions. Who was going to voice Optimus Primal? How would they incorporate the events of the Beast Wars cartoon into a movie set in the 90s? Was Cheetor going to do this face? Was Rhinox going to shit himself again? I wasn't too concerned really. I like Beast Wars a lot, and honestly, you wouldn't really have to do much to make me enjoy a Beast Wars movie. Just have the gorilla say maximize and have him do some cool gorilla stuff and we're gold, okay? What nobody expected was the unfortunate reality that the Maximals are so nothing in this movie that you could have replaced them with any other faction and nothing would have changed. You could have had the Jointrons, the Insectatrons, the Terrans, the Minicons, the Bots. Hell, you could have just had another bunch of Autobots and the plot really wouldn't change very much. The story doesn't serve the Maximals. There is no justifiable reason to have this specific faction in the movie. You could make the argument that having them be so involved in Earth's history is a unique aspect of their characters, but the Autobots have done that too. The Terrans literally came from Earth. The Minicons spent one show buried in ancient ruins for thousands of years. The point I'm trying to make here is not that the Maximals need to have their own 100% unique story that is unlike anything any other faction has done before, but that the movie itself needs to justify their presence. Why is this a story that must be told with the Maximals and not another bunch of Autobots or whatever? The closest we get to something like this is when Optimus Primal says,
"He is not the Optimus Prime I imagined."
But it really doesn't go anywhere. The Maximals could be any other faction and the story really wouldn't change in the slightest. I wouldn't be saying this if they had a purpose beyond helping out the Autobots at the end of the movie and making Optimus Prime reconsider hating humans. Everyone said it at this point, but they're in the damn title of the movie and they have so little to do. It's weird. What's even worse to me is that they have all these beloved characters and much like Wheeljack and RC, give them nothing to do. Rhinox is meant to be this reserved, chill, brainbox scientist guy who's literally capable of ripping you apart like Play-Doh. That's what made him unique, you know? But here he's just an empty husk that stands in the background and has no lines in the movie despite getting a voice acting credit.
"We'll clear the way."
Did Rhinox say that? Or did Primal?
"We'll clear the way."
I really couldn't tell. Do you remember Rhinox's iconic line about clearing the way?
"We'll clear the way."
Try putting that on a t-shirt, Paramount. See how many you can sell. I am dead serious. I really want you to make a t-shirt that just says "We'll clear the way" on it and just see if like that sells in any capacity. I just think that would be so funny. Meanwhile, Cheetor is changed into this like competent grown-up soldier who's just kind of boring. He has a staff and he does flips and he sits like a kitty cat, but he is just there to actually, I don't know why he's here. Like, Primal at least shows Optimus Prime the way to the key, but the other two are just there for decoration, I guess. If you have one, I guess you gotta have all of them. Except Rat Trap, apparently.
There was a character named Rat-a-tat-tat.
Or Rat-a-tat-tat, I guess. Sorry for doubting you, Steven. Cheetor gets like 2 or 3 lines, all of which tell us nothing about his personality.
More enemies are landing. We won't be safe for long, but not for humans. Noah!
There's one that kind of hints at some deeper character where Cheetor calls Mirage brother. Like maybe he sees the Maximals and Autobots as brothers in arms? I don't know, I'm clutching at straws here.
Sorry about scaring you, brother. Scared? Please, I'm not scared. That's just engine oil.
Can we stop with the anatomy jokes, please? You're so weird.
Every single scene does not matter. There's no scene that matters. Not a word, not a moment, anything. There's no things happening. Where are the characters at emotionally all the time? Because not a word, not a moment matters. The script does not matter. Again, something I love about Steven is he does not matter. There aren't lines. There aren't things happening. There aren't characters. The emotions are gonna not matter. I think Beast Wars does not matter. There's no giant, massive robot alien that matters. Isn't that like a message for the world, right? Like whoever you are, wherever you're from, does not matter.
This isn't even touching on the fact that the Maximals are, again, voiced by a cast of great actors, all of which are given very little to say or do in the short time they're on screen. Optimus Primal is voiced by Ron Perlman, who's probably one of my favorite actors, honestly.
Movies have had such a profound effect on me, and I think the reason, I'm just a kind of a
I wasn't all that happy with his performance as Optimus Primal in the Power of the Prime series, but I thought he could knock it out of the park with some good direction. Unlike Peter Dinklage, he's proven time and time again that he's a great vocal performer, so I was kind of really excited to see him have another crack at the role of Monkey Man.
Any interruption will ignite it, like a bomb.
He's not as monotone and empty as he sounded in Power of the Primes, but he at least sounds like he cares this time, so that's good. It's just, again, he isn't really given much to do. He's characterized well enough, and I think his design is kinda cool, albeit completely unable to blend in with other gorillas if he tried, but he's really only there to take Optimus Prime to the second half of the key, and then he doesn't have much of a purpose outside of that. Cheetor and Rhinox are given even less to do somehow. Their character bios point to there being some kind of character that we never saw in the movie. Rhinox is smart? Where was that in the movie? Cheetor doesn't think things through? When? When he jumped on Mirage and made him piss his pants? We're introduced to them at the start of the movie where we have this scene where they're all escaping this planet which is called Jungle Planet. There's some gorilla guy named Diddy Kong who sacrifices himself to keep Scourge busy while the rest of the Maximals escape. The scene's kinda neat, I guess. It's not a great set piece, but it's okay. What I couldn't predict when I first saw this movie was that this relatively straightforward scene would go on to create one of the biggest splits in the wider Transformers community, since Vector Sigma kidnapped 5 girls and made them wear funny outfits and forced them to play with Transformers toys in the Japanese version of Transformers Prime. Yeah, I'm serious, look it up. One of the most argued over aspects of this movie is this weird time travel stuff that isn't made clear in any way. When Airazor first meets the Autobots, she says,
"I am a Maximal, a warrior from both your past and future."
I kind of just took this as like a weird sort of cryptic vague line like Yoda or something, like she wants to be mysterious for some reason, but apparently the Maximals literally came from the future. I guess it's safe to assume that they did. They came from the future in the original Beast Wars cartoon, so maybe they came back from the future here as well. They do say that the Transwarp key can open portals through space and time.
If Unicron were to get the key, he could open a portal through time and space.
What really confuses everybody is the opening scene, because it's made so bafflingly unclear as to when this is set that the audience has to fill in the gaps themselves. So one of 3 things happened. 1. The Maximals never traveled in time and Airazor was just saying some weird cryptic bullshit. 2. The Maximals traveled from the future to the planet at the beginning of the movie before the movie started, and the scene on the planet is actually set in the far past. 3. The Maximals are from the future and that planet at the beginning of the movie was in the future, meaning that Scourge either traveled in time to get to Optimus Primal again, or that the Unicron and Scourge in the rest of the movie are actually the 2 characters from the past, meaning that by killing Scourge at the end of the movie, Cranky Kong never died at the beginning, creating a separate timeline. But then how could Unicron travel in time? He needs the Transwarp key to travel in time, so he wouldn't be able, but then he wouldn't need the key to... Option 2 makes the most sense, but it's really not made very clear at all that that's what took place. We learn they possibly time traveled, and because we haven't been given a reason to think otherwise, our stupid brains immediately assume this portal we saw at the beginning of the movie was actually a time portal. I've seen people arguing so much about how the hell this time travel shit even works in this movie, because much like a lot of the other stuff in this movie, it feels like there's something missing here. Like you couldn't have at least put a little text splash on the screen to clarify everything?
This is where we start reading the timeline, right? It's in the future. The Maximals are born, Transwarp key is created, they go through time and make civilizations better. You know, it's like there's like monkeys, like I mean literal monkeys here. So they go back in time, right? Yeah. And they settle on the planet. Unicron attacks Planet Poops at the start of the movie. The Maximals fuck off to Earth. No time travel. Scourge and the Terracons are just fucking waddling through space hunting for them, just like... Okay. Rise of the Beast happened. Yeah. The monkey fights Unicron, like Optimus Prime was like... Unicron takes the L, that's when the movie ends. That's the timeline.
But then what? But then how can they be created again later? If they're already there?
They're just gonna die in the past. It's a paradox.
What the
They're gonna die in the past.
The movie sucked.
Stephen Capel Jr. even said that in earlier drafts of the movie, it was more explicitly stated that the Maximals came from the future, but they removed a bunch of lines referencing the fact to not confuse people.
Because we were trying to play with the sort of time travel, which is originally in the mythology for the Beast Wars. It got just confusing, and I was like, how can I simplify it? So a lot of the rewriting and editing in post became, how can we sort of simplify the Maximal story so it doesn't confuse the audiences?
Well, I guess you didn't remove enough. In an attempt not to confuse anybody, you confused everybody. And again, this is something that could be so easily fixed by just using the movie's original opening scene. Without all this shit on the planet, nobody would be as confused as they are right now. Isn't it weird how we've had 2 movies in a row where the original opening scene that sets up the main character's arc pretty well gets replaced with a worse scene where a bunch of people get into a ship and flee the planet they're on to go to Earth? Isn't that odd? Something I find really interesting is that this whole scene parallels the opening scene in the original 86 movie, yet feels so much emptier in every way. Both show Unicron destroying a planet, This huge, unstoppable force decimating an entire world and leaving nothing in its wake. In the 86 movie, we get a little taste of the planet Unicron's about to completely demolish. We see kids running around, helicopters in the sky, people just enjoying themselves watching Even Stevens before the inevitable happens, and they all violently die in a way no one could have possibly understood or comprehended. The slow build-up of Unicron's theme creates an unparalleled sense of dread for first-time viewers. The violent synths and the heavy percussion mixed with this tune that becomes so easily identifiable by only a few notes alone builds and builds as Unicron completely wipes out a whole world for seemingly no reason. And when it's gone, what's left? Silence. There's literally nothing left. Nobody alive to tell the tale of how their world ended. It's a haunting scene, and probably my favorite in the whole movie. It's a combination of the build-up, the normalcy of what we're seeing beforehand, and the horrendous implications of what we're not seeing as well. It's a really messed up way to start your kids' movie. And that's kind of the point, I think. In Rise of the Beasts, as far as we know, Jungle Planet is just completely empty. We are never shown if the planet has any other inhabitants other than the Maximals. I mean, it's a big jungle, it's got to have some kind of unique wildlife, right? Something that might be worth preserving and protecting. Isn't that what your whole mission is about? Despite the Lovecraftian scope of what we are witnessing, it ends up feeling shallow and empty because the drama and stakes of the situation haven't been conveyed at all. Again, you really don't have to do much to make us feel upset that a whole planet got destroyed so suddenly and that millions, possibly billions, just died immediately.
I felt a great disturbance in the force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and was suddenly silent.
I like the use of Unicron's theme as this more subtle, nightmarish droning with occasional violent clashes of noise. It's a very different but equally as valid take on one of the most iconic villain themes ever. I really don't mind it. I just wish this scene was given room to breathe so we could at least take in the gravity of what Unicron is doing. Without the build-up and understanding of why the original scene worked so well, you're left with nothing. So wait, is this the Maximal homeworld, or is this just a planet the Maximals are protecting? Ah, fuck it. Actually, I've hardly mentioned Airazor, who might just be the weirdest character in the whole movie.
Airazor's job in this movie is to be strong, to be empathetic, and to be trusting.
Almost every line of dialogue she has either makes no sense or is just the most surface level cryptic bullshit. Not just the whole past and future line, she just keeps saying shit that raises even more questions that never get answered.
The others, are they?
I am all that is left.
What others? There weren't any others when you left Jungle Planet. Did more Maximals come to Earth? How did the Maximals get separated? How long have they been separated for? Has Airazor been hanging around New York this whole time, like Q the Winged Serpent living in the Chrysler Building? Why wouldn't she know where the second half of the key is? Or the first half, for that matter? It's an effigy of herself. Was she in New York to protect it? Didn't the Maximals coordinate where each half of the key was, just in case? Why doesn't the movie tell us anything? Scourge hits Airazor with this little bomb thing, which causes her to get infected with this rust. It's not like she doesn't know about it, she even acknowledges it.
That doesn't look so good.
When Scourge touches you, he leaves a mark. But I'll be all right.
Do you want to, get that checked? I know Wheeljack's not a doctor or anything, but maybe he has a gadget or a tool that can check for rust or something. Were they afraid to give him something to do? She talks all vague again, like she knows about this rust stuff already. So did she know the rust was gonna make her turn evil? Why didn't she tell anybody? She knows about dark energy and stuff, so she must know what it looks like, right? Did she actually tell anyone about the infection outside of Elena? Did she want to die? It starts making her eyes turn red during the night and she doesn't tell anybody until the morning. Why? This is the setup for the movie's third act and it makes no sense. Why didn't Scourge just use these things on the rest of the Autobots when he had a chance? He had Bumblebee in a chokehold, he could have just used it on him. Then he could have controlled them all and had an army. Did he only have one? Did Scourge foresee Airazor not telling anybody about how she was being corrupted so he could get the key? They tried to make Airazor all mysterious and sort of cryptic, like a wise old prophet or something. But she's not mysterious, she's just confusing. Most of the stuff she says is cryptic but without any deeper meaning. It's like if I went up to some guy on a mountain road in the middle of a hike and said, "The air cries a foul wind, for I am the bearer of the unpleasant Sturkus." That might sound cryptic and interesting, but all I said was that I shit my pants.
A warrior from both your past and future.
Just say where you come from, lady.
When Scourge touches you, he leaves a mark, but I'll be all right.
Do you know what this is? Anyway, Airazor gets corrupted and begs Primal to kill her, which is when we get the strangest scene in the movie. She just kind of dies. There's no sound to indicate that he, crushed her.
Do it.
Did he strangle her? Do Transformers breathe? Was crushing her really the best way to get this over with? Was this a mistake? Did they forget to add a crushing noise? Is this the return of the rogue sound mixer from earlier?
It's okay.
It's funny to think that this is the only one of our heroes to die and stay dead. I'm not saying this movie has to be like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or anything, but a little bit of bloodshed goes a long way in making us fear that these characters we like might die. But it's not like this is a good example anyway. We learned so little about Airazor that we don't feel anything when she dies. The only thing I felt was my legs succumb to the effects of leprosy in the movie theater. Part of the appeal to many fans of Beast Wars, outside of finding the outdated animation funny and the furry bait interesting, is the characters and the bonds they share. Beast Wars wouldn't have the cultural impact and following that it does if it was written like Big Bad Beetleborgs. I mean, sure, the marketability of the characters is part of the reason it did well, but the only reason kids cared about them and the reason they continue to like them as adults was because of how they were written. That's one of the core appeals of the show. It's the dissonance between the quality of the writing and the fact the show looks like this that gets newer audiences so into it. Beast Wars has been discussed to death, and I ain't gonna sit here on my dumb stupid ass and tell you for the quintillionth time why the original Beast Wars cartoon is so good. But what it boils down to is strong character writing that serves the interesting and fun overarching story. The dynamics between each individual member makes the characters fun and memorable, with a cool story that ties the events of this show to the original G1 cartoon. Now, if I'm a G1er for anything, I'd have to be a Transformers animated G1er. I have nostalgia for that show, and maybe my nostalgia blinds me to its faults, like the fact that the animation slowly degrades over the course of the show, or the fact that the climax of the episode Decepticon Air makes no damn sense, or the fact that Black Arachnia is kinda really lame. I have no nostalgia for Beast Wars. I didn't even see the show until I was in my teens, so you can't say this is nostalgia making me hate this interpretation of the Maximals, because it hasn't even been a decade since I first watched this show. Beast Wars is just a genuinely good show, and its writing and character work is the main reason why.
I used to watch Beast Wars, which was like one of my favorite TV shows. There was almost this sense of family with the Beast Wars too, like between Cheetor and Rhinox and Primal, and like they had this thing where it was like you're seeing all these different animals come together, but then they like transform into these other things, you know what I'm saying, and they fight together and they protect each other and they love each other and they really like, they go to war together, and it was like this, just I think what was so cool about it was just like the kinship between them, and like, you know, and how like relatable they felt, you know, like it was crazy. Like, wow, how do I feel like I feel this gorilla, you know, like I feel this cheetah, you know what I'm saying?
So when you take away those character dynamics, those core character traits, and you remove some of the characters that made it so memorable in the first place, and what made the team dynamic function, are you really making a Beast Wars movie? Or are you just parading around the toys you loved from when you were a kid? The relationships between each of the characters is what made them so beloved in the first place. You take that away, and what are you left with? Primal is boring, Airazor is lame as hell, Rhinox doesn't shit himself, and Cheetor doesn't ever make this face, so what's the point? It's a shame everything had to turn out this way. Like Franz Reichelt at the Eiffel Tower, we really should have seen it coming. The guys in charge seemed to think that Optimus Prime and Optimus Primal meeting was something the fans were clamoring for, something that we were all so desperate to see. I'm desperate to see what would happen if I fell into a meat grinder, but that doesn't mean I want to see it. Maybe if Gary Chalk was there reprising his role as Primal, it would have probably justified the meeting as some kind of huge deal amongst fans. But instead we got Mr. Hellman reprising a role from a show not a single person on the planet liked. It hardly feels like a big moment anyway, since they share so little screen time together. I don't want to take away the enjoyment you had for the Maximals in this movie if you did like them, but I will ask you this. Were you cheering when Optimus Primal said maximize because it was an earned moment, or because he said it in a show from your childhood? I'll let you decide. But you already know the answer to that.
What's great about Transformers is there are so many characters, there are so many things, and actually the hard part is resisting putting all of it in, because what happens when you put all of it in, and we've definitely been guilty of that before, is nobody gets enough time.
Yeah, you said it. Wait, you said that?